The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to Mercy Medical Center's live webinar. We apologize for the delay in getting started. We had some technical difficulties that I think we have worked out, and we are ready to go. Today we will be discussing girls and bullying. Joining us is Jennifer Bradley, a psychiatric nurse practitioner at Mercy Outpatient Psychiatry. After her discussion, she will take questions from our audience. To submit your questions anytime during the discussion, go to the window in the upper right-hand corner of your screen and type in your question. If you don't see the screen, click on the orange box with white arrow. Your questions will be anonymous and completely confidential. So Jennifer, let's get started.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and we'll just get going right away, and I will go through what we're going to be discussing during the presentation. And this slide lists the different topics that I will be discussing today. The first is the definition of bullying, what bullying looks like, who gets bullied and who does the bullying, in addition to what the consequences of bullying are, specific information about cyberbullying, and what parents can do to help. Now, in addition to parents, this would also apply to teachers, other family members, or counselors to help kids who are having problems. I'd like to discuss a little bit about the history of bullying, and I have a video here, if I can get it to play, which it looks like I think we're having some trouble with the video, so we'll just move forward. A little bit about the history. Bullying has been around for as long as anyone can remember. It's been a common theme in stories about childhood and adolescence. Charles Dickens wrote Oliver Twist and the Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby, and it discussed bullying in these books. More recently, Nick Hornby wrote a novel called About a Boy. In recent years, bullying has received a lot of attention. Today it is recognized as a worldwide issue for many children and youth. Some call it an epidemic. I'd like to just go through a little story here that illustrates sometimes what happens to a child who is being bullied. Scarlett made for a good target. The daughter of a Williamsburg artist, she wore funky clothing to her East Village school. She had a mild learning disability and was generally timid and insecure. Lila, the resident mean girl in Scarlett's class, started in immediately. Scarlett, she sneered, couldn't read. Her Payless and Gap shoes weren't good enough. She wasn't allowed to play with certain girls. Lila was forming a band, and Scarlett couldn't be a part of it. One girl threatened to physically hurt her. During recess, Lila would loom over Scarlett, arms crossed, and say, "I'm watching you." I was in middle school before things got so awful for me as they did for Scarlett, said Scarlett's mother. She was shocked by the hostility at such a young age. You know, and this is just one illustration of a story that many children go through. And probably you've had a child who has come home, if you're a parent, and has told you about other kids being mean to them, making fun of them, you know, even friends threatening to kick them out of their social group. We've also seen the headlines, you know, children who have committed suicide after being bullied, whether this be on, you know, the internet or at school. So this is really a very serious issue that needs to be addressed. So to move forward, I'm going to talk to you about the definition of bullying. As the slide says here, it is a purposeful infliction of psychological or physical pain on one individual by another or by a group. There is behavior that harms others through damaging relationships or feelings of acceptance, friendships, or group inclusion. There can be subversive tactics such as manipulation to assert power and control over others. And I think the one thing to note here is that this is an intentional act. The child who is doing the bullying wants to harm the victim. It is not an accident. And it is characterized by repeated occurrences. It is not consistent with a single incident or a random act. It happens over and over. So if there's a fight on the playground between two kids of equal power, this is not bullying. The child who bullies definitely has an advantage over the child who is being victimized. And kind of what we're going to be focusing more on today has to do with girl bullying, which tends to be different than boys. Boys do tend to be more physical. So in what we're going to be talking about today, it is also called girl-to-girl hostility, girl-to-girl bullying, or relational aggression. And there are many strategies to bullying. There are, I think, the in-your-face or the more observed physical bullying, which is, hitting, kicking, beating up, pushing, spitting, property damage, or theft. But there can also be verbal bullying, social bullying, and then cyber or electronic bullying. And I'm going to go through primarily the last three that I just talked about in relationship to girl relationships. However, boys can be a part of the same kind of behavior. So statistically, there are nearly 8 times as many girls as boys who participate in what has been termed relational aggression. Between 5 and 10% of children experience chronic peer relationship difficulties, such as peer rejection or peer harassment. Like I said before, some say this has reached epidemic proportions. It can start as early as kindergarten and go throughout elementary school, but between 10 to 17% of middle and high school adolescents report some form of mistreatment by their peers. And finding a real specific percentage for who has been bullied is very, the numbers are very different. Some are lower percentages, some are very high percentages, because I think that indicates that at some point almost everyone has had to deal with maybe this relational aggression in their lives. So how do girls bully? Well, it happens in many ways, and these are just a few examples of how that might be. There might be threatening instant messages or emails over the internet. They may make cruel verbal comments to each other. There is gossiping or spreading of rumors. There is exclusion from groups, isolation, or alienation. Or they may write notes to each other about someone else. They seek alliances, so trying to get people to take sides. They may try to steal each other's, girlfriends or boyfriends. They may terminate a friendship for no reason. One day they may be sitting at the lunch table all together, and the next day a person has said, "You're no longer welcome to sit here." They may just deliberately ignore you or tell your secrets during moments of anger. So these can be all very devastating things for girls to go through, and really affects many things in many aspects of their lives. So I wanted to go through a few myths that people have heard about bullies and the people who are bullied. The first one is that bullies are rejected by their peers and have no friends. Now, actually, research shows that this is not the case. A lot of people like to believe that everybody dislikes the class bully. However, many bullies have high status in their classrooms and have a lot of friends. Particularly during the middle school years, some bullies were actually quite popular among their classmates, and they were perceived as being cool. Number 2, another myth is that bullies have low self-esteem. And again, this is an incorrect assumption that bullies are rejected by peers and have no friends. Much research shows that bullies do not suffer from low self-esteem, that they report themselves in a positive light. Sometimes they display inflated views about themselves and have high self-esteem. This sometimes encourages bullies to rationalize some of their behaviors. Another misconception is that being a victim of a bully builds character. I just want to let everybody know that bullying is not a normal part of childhood and adolescence. It does not build character. It increases the vulnerabilities of the child. And actually, we'll talk about here in a little bit some of the problems that children have and adolescents or teenagers if they've been the victims of a bully. Another myth is that there is a victim personality, meaning that certain types of kids get bullied. And this is, there's some controversy here, but, there is not one type of person who is more likely to be a victim of bullying. There are certain characteristics. Sometimes children who are shy may be victims more often, but that's not always the case. Usually, when a victim is bullied, it's because there's something different. It could be an accent. It could be, having a learning disability, but it could also be the prettiest girl in the class. So there are is a wide range of people who can be victims of a bully. And then finally, the last myth is that bullying only involves perpetrators and victims. And actually this is, not 100% true, because usually other kids around them know what's going on, because a lot of times it takes place at school, or if it's over the internet, a lot of times a lot of people have access to the bullying that's going on. So what are the effects of people, who are bullied? There is a lot of different issues that have come up for people who have been bullied, or things that people who go through who have been bullied. So there can be immediate problems, but then there can also be future problems for personal, academic, and career development. The child definitely has more stress. They're more prone to having an eating disorder, psychological disturbances, self-destructive behavior, social maladjustment or loneliness, deficiencies in their physical well-being. So this may be a child who reports a lot of headaches or stomach aches, lower self-esteem, higher rates of being absent from school. This can also include arriving late to school on a frequent basis, or arriving just on time so they can just go right into the classroom. There can be depression. There can be a higher rate of suicide, running away from home, alcohol and drug abuse. Kids who are bullied tend to have a lot of things taken from them, so they lose their belongings. They don't have spend a lot of time with kids of the same age group. They may spend time with younger students, appear to be alone a lot of the time, not get a good amount of sleep, and have trouble with anxiety or aggression issues. So there are a lot of things that can happen to the child who is being bullied, and it can affect many different aspects of their lives and how they're doing physically as well as emotionally. Now, just to touch on a little bit here, what is the impact on the bully? Meaning, how, what can affect the child who bullies? What problems might they develop? And actually, they can have trouble with frequent fighting, getting injured because they're in fights, vandalizing property, stealing property. They may be more likely to drink alcohol or to smoke cigarettes, to be truant from school, drop out of school, and have some criminal issues. So, if a bully is allowed to continue, with the same behaviors, there can definitely be some negative effects on the child moving forward in their lives. So the big question, why do kids bully? There is a lot of different factors that play a role here. First of all, to talk about the family risk factors. Some of the things that can be a problem are a lack of warmth and involvement on the part of the parents, or it can be overly permissive parenting. So there just is not any limits on the child's behavior. There could be a lack of supervision by parents, or there may be harsh and physical discipline, or the parents model bullying behavior. Peer risk factors, meaning their friends, if they have a friend who bullies, they are more likely to engage in bullying activity. or they hang around with friends who have positive attitudes about violence. Some aggressive children who take on high-status roles may use bullying as a way to enhance their social power and protect their reputation with their friends. Some, children with lower social status may use bullying as a way to deflect the teasing and aggression that they have to enhance their social position, just to kind of move up in the social status with their friends or peers, people who aren't even necessarily friends. And then some other risk factors might include, if kids are exposed to bullying behaviors, whether it be on television, movies, video games, they may be more likely to bully. Also, bullying thrives in schools where faculty and staff do not address bullying, or where there's not a policy against bullying and little supervision of students, especially during lunch, bathroom breaks, or recess. Also, anytime there's a large group of students together, if there are negative behaviors that are supported by the mass, so to speak, it tends to continue to if violence, be more prone to continued violence. For teenage girls, social aggression can be a way of creating excitement or alleviating boredom. And it's also a method of gaining attention from other girls to secure their friendships. So there can be a ton of risk factors for why kids are bullying, and a lot of different reasons why. Sometimes I think, we'd like to believe it is because of one reason when really that's not even why it's occurring. Now, what are the signs that a child might be bullying others? This is kind of a hard one to determine, but I think these are some characteristics that are, that a child might have that might make them more likely to bully. They have an average or above average self-esteem. They have an impulsive personality. They may lack empathy, so meaning they don't really have a lot of caring for how other people feel. They have difficulty conforming to rules, positive attitudes about violence. And again, some bullies are quite popular, so they enjoy the status and the esteem from their peers and even teachers. And that behavior continues. So why is bullying hard to change? Number one, bullying others is a way of feeling powerful. So, children need something in their lives positive to feel personal power, and if they get power from bullying, this tends to become a positive thing. Number two, bullying others is a tool for popularity. So when a child is looking for ways to feel popular, it's challenging to try to redirect the child's potential toward a more positive, towards something more positive, like leadership skills or that sort of thing. So they tend to resort to bullying. Bullying is hard to change because it takes two people. There's an aggressor-victim relationship that can involve, a very complex dynamic between two children. And these relationships form when the aggressor finds a victim who can be successfully dominated because the victim is weaker. If they don't have somebody who will stick up for them, or if the child shows signs of suffering, such as crying, that relationship becomes very strong, and it's very hard to break that relationship between the bully and the victim. Number four, social aggression is a learned behavior. So kids who have been exposed to aggression, whether it's through video games or actually seeing physical aggression, that's very much a part of their learned behavior, and that's hard to change. Number five, peer group reputations stay the same. So if you're a victim or a bully, it's hard to change that reputation over time, so kids tend to stay in those roles. Number six, the rewards of bullying stay the same. So typically bullies do not work alone. They form a coalition with other children in their peer group, which increases their status and helps them stay in charge. And because they have this reward, that bullying continues. And then finally, you know, what the peers expect of bullies and victims stay the same. So that's kind of similar as to what, you know, we just discussed before. It's hard to change a role that a person has maintained for a period of time. So before we move on to, you know, what parents can do to help, I just wanted to touch on cyberbullying because it's such a big issue. So how does cyberbullying occur? It occurs through cell phones, you know, and text messages. So it can be leaving multiple voicemails, sending pictures, texting by phone, also on the internet by email, instant messaging, chat rooms, different websites. And it can actually also happen through, you know, online gaming, you know, because people can talk to each other, and there's a, you know, a relative amount of anonymity, you know, of being anonymous. You know, I think with cyberbullying, there's a little bit different twist because you're not viewing the person face-to-face necessarily, and sometimes you can do things without being caught, so to speak, as easily. So the nature of cyberbullying also often includes sending mean, vulgar, or threatening messages, posting sensitive or private information or pictures about another person, intentionally excluding people from online groups, pretending to be somebody else in order to make that person look bad, spreading lies and rumors, tricking someone into revealing personal information. And just as a side note, children who face-to-face bully typically bully online. You know, and why is cyberbullying so bad? Part of this is because the students who are victimized have no place to hide. They can be targeted any time, any place, and any time of the day. And it can involve a very wide audience and can be distributed quickly. So this is a very big problem. Also, the cyberbully can be relatively protected, as I said before, which can safeguard them from punishment or retaliation. So what do you do if your child is experiencing cyberbullying? I think these 4 things here are big things that you can do. Advise your child to ignore the message, and do not respond to the message, but to save the evidence and to tell a trusted adult. Do not forward it to anybody. And I think as a parent, it's important not to ignore the problem. You know, show kids how to block and delete messages without reading them if they have been receiving multiple messages from a certain child. Never encourage your child to seek revenge, which can further escalate the problem. Remind kids to keep their password secret, and part of this may, you know, involve having to set up new email, instant messaging, gaming, or cell phone accounts, and then encouraging them to keep their password secret. And I also think you need to increase the supervision of what happens online with your kids. Also, a few other things. You know, you need to assure children that if they're bullied on the internet, it's not their fault. You know, they should be careful about what information they're sharing, and encourage them to spend more time face-to-face with people rather than so much time online. Develop clear and concise rules for your child's behavior regarding the internet. Increase your knowledge of technology. Explain to your child that this kind of behavior is unacceptable, you know, so that they're less likely to repeat the behavior themselves. Model respect, kindness, and empathy. Be realistic and get your child involved in more social activities outside of the internet. Okay. Now, I think this is a big part. You know, what can parents do to help eliminate bullying? Number 1, talk with and listen to your kids. Parents are often the last to know when their child has been bullied or is being bullied. You need to engage in frequent conversations about their social lives, ask who they're spending time with, what they're doing at lunch. And if you're able to, it's always good to spend time at school and at recess. 67% of bullying happens when adults are not present. And unfortunately, schools do not have the resources to do it all. So if you can, it's always good to volunteer at school. Number 3, be a good example of kindness and leadership. Your kids learn about power relationships from you. So it's always good for a parent to model effective communication techniques. Try not to blow your top with your kids. Anytime you speak to someone in a mean or abusive way, you're teaching your children that this is okay. Number 4, learn the signs. Most kids do not tell anyone when they're being bullied. So some of those behaviors that occur, when a child is being bullied, you really need to try to watch for in your children if you think that they might be the victims of a bully. So you need to learn to recognize those signs. Number 5, help create healthy anti-bullying habits early. Coach your children on what not to do. No pushing, no hitting, no teasing, and try to focus on how another child might feel if they're on the receiving end. And this can teach them how to have empathy for other kids. You also need to teach the kids to learn how to say no firmly and how to avoid being mean to others. Number 6, help your child's school address bullying effectively. Research shows that zero-tolerance policies are not effective alone. There needs to be ongoing educational programs, and if you think this is happening in the school, you need to be talking to the principal and trying to address the issues that are coming up at the school with children. Number 7, establish household rules about bullying. Your kids need to hear from you that it's not normal, okay, or tolerable for them to be a bully or to be bullied. And it's not okay to stand by and watch other kids be bullied. Number 8, teach your child how to be a good witness. So kids who are bullied often feel powerless, and they don't feel like they can do anything to stop it. Your child should not put themselves in danger, but they can, tell the bully to stop bullying. And then it's important not to give extra attention to the bully. Number 9, teach your child about cyberbullying. Most kids don't realize what this is, and so it happens without the child thinking that it's something that's abnormal. And finally, spread the word that bullying should not be a normal part of childhood. So actions that parents can take if their child has been involved in the bullying. Talk with the children's principal and teachers and see if they have noticed anything. Have your principal talk to the other teachers and have them be on the lookout and to intervene if an episode is repeated. Arrange for socialization outside of school because this helps maintain a strong support system, and encourage your child to be with a friend because they're less likely to be targeted if they're not alone. And again, make sure your child knows that what's happening to them is not acceptable and should not be continued. And now I think the last slide here is what should children do if they see somebody being bullied? And then number 1, it says stop your bullying. Most bullies will stop within 10 seconds if someone tells them to. So a child, who witnesses bullying is very likely to make a positive difference by simply saying something like this statement. Or, if you don't stop, I'm going to report you. So it's important that the person who sees this tries to intervene, but they also make sure that they are not in a position to be hurt. Number 2, support the victim. A lot of times other children will stand passively watching somebody being bullied, and if you feel like you're in a position not to be able to help, then it's important to walk away and not provide more attention to the situation. So reducing attention to the bully, and then again, reporting the bully. So this was just a quick run through of some real basics about bullying. And on this last slide here are my references, and the majority of information came from these references. And one that I wanted to mention, which is good, is the Bullying at School and Online. It was by the American Association of School Administrators, and actually a very good one to get a hold of if you're wanting more information about bullying. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. To remind our listeners that your questions can be submitted from the box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And let's take a look here to see our questions. And the first question, Jennifer, do you recommend a parent contact the parent of the bully directly as an action? My daughter's school recommends the parent. Can we click down to see more? Next question. My school recommends the parents contact each other as a first step. So what do you think of that?
Well, I can see where there would be a lot of different answers to this question. To me, I really feel like the school probably needs to step up and take a bigger role there. And if they are seeing a lot of bullying going on, that they really need to be having some assemblies and talking about bullying. You know, I think there can be the potential for, you know, it would be, you know, difficult possibly when parents are trying to discuss with each other maybe negative things about the children in a positive manner. So, you know, I guess if you know who the parents are, if you feel comfortable doing that, then you know, it's probably not a bad choice, but I really think the schools need to step up and address these issues at school also.
Okay, another question we have. My son sometimes bullies his younger siblings and neighbors. You know, how do you recommend I handle this?
Well, you know, I think the relationship between siblings is always going to be different than the relationship between peers or friends, you know. So I think some of that behavior is normal. You know, now you don't want to let it get too out of hand because you don't want younger kids or smaller kids being victimized. So I think a big part of that is talking about how, you know, aggression or, you know, mistreatment of a person, whether it's through extreme teasing or taunting, is not acceptable in your home. You know, so I think that that's how you handle that. I don't know if I would necessarily call it bullying, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed.
Here's another one related to the schools. This is coming from a teacher. Do you have any specific advice that you would give teachers?
Well, I think that the advice for parents is similar to how teachers should handle that. You know, they can model good behavior in their classroom. They can talk about what's acceptable at school, what's acceptable in the classroom, and really a lot of the same techniques that parents can use, teachers can also use. So I think that.
Very good. You said earlier that more girls bully than boys. Do you know why this is?
I think a lot of that has to do with how girls view relationships in their lives. I think they, you know, place a lot of importance on social relationships, you know, whereas maybe boys' relationships are based more on, you know, how they do in sports or how big they are, that sort of thing. And whereas girls have definitely more of an emotional connection, and it's important to them to, you know, maintain these relationships. And I think that that has a lot to do with why girls tend to have more difficulties in their relationships.
Another question here. My daughter has been bullied at school for 7 years, and the school has not effectively handled it. I've talked and talked to my daughter. Where can I get professional help for my child? Good question.
Yeah, I'm, you know, and, you know, really just sorry to hear that your daughter has been going through this for so long. You know, and I definitely think it would be good for your daughter and maybe you as well to talk to a counselor. And I think the counselors at Mercy Family Counseling are a great resource. I mean, they definitely are going to have some experience with this, and you know, and if you know, the one thing that you can do would be to call the counseling center and schedule an appointment, and their number is
the number 319-369.
No, sorry, the counseling number is 319-396-8255. 398-6575. 398-6575. Sorry, that's 398-6575.
Okay, sorry for that little mix-up there. Let's see, another question. Can you give any tips on how to make my child less a target, less different?
Well, I think the one thing that's important to talk to your kids about is, you know, if they are in a position where they've been bullied, to talk to somebody. I think, again, that's the big problem. You know, unfortunately, there are things about our kids maybe that we can't always change. You know, if you have a shy child, you can't make them outgoing. If you have, you know, a child who has a learning disability, we can't take that away. You know, the prettiest girl in the class, you know, is not going to become ugly. You know, so a lot of times it's not really about anything the child can change, more so I really think telling somebody, you know, if you're being bullied, and then having adults in your life help you, you know, is really the way, you know, to go.
So the emphasis should be on the bully, not on the person who is being bullied, then, to give them any feeling that they are doing anything to cause the bullying.
Right.
Okay. All right. Another question, news stories of trials related to cases of bullying and where the teenager committed suicide and so on. Do you think these have any impact on bullies in the whole issue, for good or for bad?
Well, I think in a good way, you know, it does send a message that bullying is not tolerated, you know, that, you know, when bad things happen, you know, and people are hurt, that there are definitely consequences. So I think in that regard, it's good to know that society is not supportive of, you know, people who are bullies or who hurt other people. You know, I think it's, you know, some of the negatives is, you know, I would hate for a child to, you know, hear about a suicide and believe that that would be an, you know, an alternative for them, or something that would be a way for them to, you know, not be in the situation that they're in. So I think talking about it, you know, if you have, you know, a child who brings this up, or if they've been bullied or they're in that situation, to let them know that there's help, that they don't have to commit suicide, that they, you know, don't need to run away from home, you know, that sort of thing. So I can see it as being good and bad, but, you know, a good teaching moment.
To use that news story as a teachable moment,
yeah,
then, to get the conversation started. Yeah. Let's see. Another question here. Our school principal indicated that exclusion and intentional isolation is a form of bullying in Iowa. Do you know if this is accurate, or where some references might be?
Well, I do know that, yes, being intentionally excluded from a group, or being ignored, or being forced out of a group is definitely a form of bullying. As far as some references, what I referred to in the references, there was some information about the exclusion and that sort of thing. And actually, you can download this book online. It's called Bullying at School and Online, and it is a downloadable resource. So I hope that answers your question, but yes, that is definitely a form of bullying.
I believe we have covered all the questions submitted to us, but if you have additional questions, you can call the 319-369-4777, and this is, I believe, Jennifer, this is the outpatient psychiatric clinic. So they would be able to be in touch with you, or
right,
someone could answer the question. A tape of this program will be available at www.mercycare.org/live, and be sure and check this website for information about future webinars. Our next webinar will be Thursday, June 16th at noon. Dr. Sharon Bertroche is a Mercy physician at Marion Mercy Care, we'll be discussing HPV and Gardasil updates. And then Dr. Bertosh will take your questions live after her presentation. Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you